So we may have officially gotten past that Twilight era and scary vampires are making a comeback. I'm here for it.
Annie, where are you? Answer me.
So just for context, I have never seen the original Salem's Lot, and the only thing I ever think of when I hear Salem's Lot are the lyrics from Eminem's Lose Yourself from 8 Mile. Maybe that's just me, but it is what it is. This is obviously a remake, but I don't really know what they changed, so I'm going into it with that perspective, be warned, so don't really have any contrast, what they did better or worse, just reviewing the modern film. And I do have to say, when it started off, I was intrigued enough because I'm happy, as I said in the intro, we're getting a comeback of traditional vampire movies. We're not going that elevated route, nothing sappy. We're getting just old school scary vampires. I can get on board with that. It follows this character named Ben Mears. He's coming back to his hometown looking for inspiration. He's a writer, and basically he finds out his hometown is being overtaken by vampires. Cookie cutter run-of-the-mill story, but if you do it well enough, I can get on board with it. And starting off, I was at least intrigued enough to see where this was going to go because it's a more modernized take, and Stephen King movies usually don't really hit for me, so that's another one of the things to be wary of. I feel like a lot of his movies have not aged well, so I understand why we're going through this era of remakes, trying to update some of his material. So I really wanted to see what they were going to do, and I'll start off by saying I do like the vampires in this film, okay? If you're somebody who likes old school scary vampires, I do think they look visually appealing and cool. But the real problem of this film, I think, is it just feels like it lacks soul, if that makes sense. It doesn't really feel like it has any of that oomph that gives a creative work its power. This is one of those films you're watching and it just feels kind of like a remake cash grab. Like they didn't have anything that they really wanted to add to this. They just wanted to make this because they thought it would be an easy buck. Because right off the opening bat, this movie didn't even feel cinematic, at least not to me. It felt like a straight to TV movie. One of those movies you'd grow up with watching as a kid, the 80s, the 90s, and it was just on the weekend. Kind of like the original It. This movie feels like that. It doesn't feel like anything that would have ever made it to theater. It just feels like a straight to TV show. And that's the other thing. It kind of feels like it should have been a show, not a movie. So tonally, pacing, it's all over the place. And I won't say this is absolutely unwatchable or anything. It's just one of those movies you'll watch once and you'll probably never remember or care to watch again. Because this movie just feels so generic. The other major problem this film really has is it never gets you to invest in the characters. When I was doing this review, I had to look up a synopsis of what the characters' names were. The only character I actually remembered during this film is a kid named Mark. He's the only one who really stands out. You can get on board with his actions, what he's trying to do. He's fairly memorable. Everybody else in this, no reason to buy into their characters. There's nothing memorable about them. They're not incredibly well acted. They're all just kind of there. That's what this movie feels like. It just feels like it's there in the ether somewhere. You've just stumbled upon this one day and you said, I'll throw on Salem's Lot. That's the type of movie this is. There's nothing you're going to remember about this movie in 20 minutes. I mentioned initially I was on board because I do like an old school vampire mystery where you get some blood, some kills, creatures of the night. You know that shtick. I like that. We don't get that too much anymore. But after the first 20, 30 minutes or so, I thought this film was paced incredibly poorly. I was bored during the middle hour of this. It feels like when you're watching this, there was an executive who just took an axe and just started chopping pieces of it up because it just doesn't flow fluently. It just feels like a movie that's been over edited a bunch. The whole middle half of this, as I said, is just paced so slow, so boring, so poorly. Yeah, it stands out like a sore thumb. This is no way the final edit of this. I would be curious what a director's cut looked like. When you're watching a movie like this, I feel like you should get invested in the mystery of what's going on in this town with the vampires and the natives. This guy comes back to his hometown. Vampires are clearly here. They're taking over. And you should start to care about these characters, whether they make it out alive or not, what's going on with them, how this mystery started with the vampires. And you just don't really ever care about any of it because you're not invested in these characters. You don't really care about the vampires. They're interesting enough to look at, but they're nothing you haven't seen 100 times before. So this whole movie feels really derivative. It doesn't feel like it's unique enough. You needed another 2-hour movie about it. Just one of these mysteries that's not interesting enough to keep you engaged in the entire premise of what's going on with the vampires. You're watching it and after a while, it just feels like you want to see more vampires, more kills, because the mystery side of it, how they're going to get out of it, it's just not that interesting. I also have to point out this is one of those films where it feels like there's a lot of forced exposition so you'll understand the backstory of this. And you just have characters that at a certain point I couldn't help but wonder, how do you know this? Because a scene will go on and a character will just give an explanation of what's going on. They'll explain vampires. They seemingly have all of the answers to this solution and what they need to do, what's going on in this town, how they can interact with these vampires. Certain characters almost have a superpower of being all knowing of what's going on to every character because they need it to be. It's convenient for the plot, because if they didn't, this movie would not flow. As I've said for the third time, it feels very cut, like it's spliced together. Doesn't have any fluidity to it. It doesn't feel like it was filmed in order, and it just feels like it was pieced together in the last second so they could market this movie because they had an extra bunch of footage they couldn't do anything with. And when you do get to the ending, I thought the ending was okay. It was just completely fine, completely mediocre, as the kids say, mid. Nothing you're going to remember. It just feels like the most run-of-the-mill story. You can probably predict how it's going to end when you see the poster. So that's what you're getting in this. Overall, guys, I thought this movie was incredibly forgettable. It's probably the definition of mid, right down the middle, 5 out of 10. Won't remember this movie. Completely forgettable, one and done. No super memorable characters. The acting is completely mediocre. The scenery and the cinematography is okay at certain points, cool at others where you have some cool looks to the vampires. But this story was just not engaging to me. I thought the mystery was very generic. I don't know. This is a movie I would only recommend if you have nothing else to do. So if any of you guys seen this remake of Salem's Lot, if you have, comment down below, or let me know what you think of it compared to the original or vice versa. All of that, just comment it all. As always, if you haven't subscribed, join me down below, but that's all I got in this video. Peace!